Hi everyone, this is Sally Garozzo here. Welcome. This is the Anxiety Compass Facebook group and this is the Power Hour. Welcome to everybody who is watching, and every Monday night we bring you something live. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Sally Garozzo and I am a true multi-passionate woman. I am a rapid transformational therapist, I am a singing teacher, and I am the founder of Inspiring Talks Brighton, because I truly believe in changing the world one person at a time, and I'm very fulfilled doing that. Hey De-nit-sa, I can see that you're watching. I'm going to bring you on shortly. I'm just going to invite some people, so just bear with me. Let's see. No, not that one. Yeah, let's invite a few people. So bear with me while I'm doing this. I will try and talk at the same time, actually. Why not? Let's see if we can multitask. So what do I want to say? Yes. Basically, having experienced quite debilitating anxiety and depression myself, I am really passionate about helping people to overcome their own blocks and to really become free within themselves. So letting go of those blocks and moving into a life that they are really passionate about. So this is the Power Hour tonight, and I'm going to introduce you to Danica Appoline in a moment. So please join us. Please get your questions ready. She's a very special friend. We don't know each other really well, but I met De-nit-sa years and years ago when I was looking for some healthy cakes, and through synchronicity I found out about Danica Appoline and her cakes, and she created these amazing cakes called conscious cakes. And since then, she's gone on to do other extraordinary things, which she is going to tell you about tonight, including writing a book called The Medicine Code. So I'm going to introduce her. De-nit-sa is a thought leader. She's a writer, she's a speaker, and she really is a visionary on health, medicine, food, happiness, ethical business, humanity, and our beautiful planet. She's really passionate. She spent years working in pharmacies and was planning on becoming a pharmacist herself, but her life took an unexpected turn and she ended up studying psychology instead, and became a strength specialist coach and an energy healer. And she actually trained me in theta healing a few years ago. She's now studying homeopathy, and she's highly passionate about natural approaches to medicine and how we live. And I can't wait to get her on and share stuff with you. She's really big into nature and what nature can offer us. She also has knowledge about neuroscience, spirituality, and like me, she believes that Star Trek is real, and so are aliens. So I'm going to bring her on right now. Here she is. Let's bring her on.
Hello.
Hey Rachel, how you doing? Hey De-nit-sa, how you doing? Sorry.
Hello, I'm good, thanks. Hello, Sally. Hello, Rachel. Lovely to be here finally after last week. So
yeah,
lovely to be connecting.
We cracked the code eventually, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And it was apologies, everyone. It was that I had a very old Facebook app that wasn't allowing me to do this, but here we are.
Oh, brilliant. So you're here now, and that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
So De-nit-sa, I would like you to talk to us and everybody about who you are, what you do, what you're passionate about, and perhaps a little bit of telling us about your own experience with anxiety. Should we start there?
Yeah, okay. So thank you very much, Sally, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. So I as that introduction says, I'm fascinated by health, but a lot of my journey has been around having to work on myself and my issues. And one of the things that fascinates me is that people who come into other forms of health usually do so because they've got their own issues to be working through. And my background, I as you so beautifully said, I was always going to be a pharmacist. I spent years planning on being a pharmacist, but that took an unexpected turn, and I studied psychology and worked in mental health with people who have very severe mental health problems like schizophrenia and bipolar affective disorder when I first graduated. And then went into something that I'd been doing as a student at university, which was I was a volunteer trainer for a listening helpline that's a bit like the Samaritans but for students. And I loved training, and I'm going to talk a tiny weeny bit about my experience of that actually, because I realised something very significant about anxiety through my experiences there. And so moved away from mental health into training because my mum was sick and she had terminal cancer, and I couldn't care for people at work and be the main carer at home. So I made a choice to stop being in such a front-facing caring role at work. I went into training and worked in the charity sector and in the education sector, a little bit in the corporate sector. And life kind of took me in a new direction. I never lost my love of medicine. I studied reflexology, which was the first moment at which I realised that there is more to health than we are taught in mainstream science and in the education system that we have. I saw miraculous, remarkable things just through what we can see in the feet. And that just opened my eyes, and I've been on a journey of discovery ever since. In the meantime, I'm a writer. You mentioned that I've written a book called Nature's Medicine Code, which I'm really excited about. I'm really passionate about. And I'm an entrepreneur. You mentioned the cakes. And I still work as a healer, and people come to me for healing because I found energy healing along the way. And as you mentioned, I am a student homeopath, and eventually medicine got me again, and I'm now studying to be a homeopath, which has been remarkable actually, and I'll be sharing a little bit of what I've discovered from that too. So I'm going to share what I actually did, Sally, and I don't know whether you'd like to share this with the group after this is done, because I'll have to pull it off my phone and I can't multitask enough to do it right now. But I wrote out what I was going to talk about, because I know we've got an hour, and I realised that there was so much I wanted to share that I didn't know how much of it I'd be able to squeeze into an hour. So what I've done is I've actually written a whole guide to anxiety as I have experienced it. So I shall send you the link for that afterwards. So
thank you so much. That is amazing. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's truly amazing. You've done that.
You are so
for
welcome.
us.
And thank you for inspiring me to do that, because actually I've never, this is the first time, hello Lisa, this is the first time I've ever really talked about my experience of anxiety personally, but also what I've learned through my work with clients. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through my experience and what with all the many different, I've got 12 things that I've tried with myself, but also some of which I've shared with clients. So I'm going to just give a brief summary of each of those, because I know there's so much to talk about, and there's more information on the article that I put together, the guide that I wrote.
That sounds awesome. You are I can't wait for this. While you talk, I'm going to invite some more people.
Brilliant. You do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my own personal experience with anxiety came from having grown up in a really dysfunctional home. My father was pathologically violent, and violent when he was sober, so it was completely unpredictable. And in addition to that, my mother was mentally ill, and she had bipolar affective disorder. And so home was an incredibly unsafe place for me, and I didn't feel safe. Hello, Helen. Lovely to see you. I remember as a small person waking up in the night and immediately feeling anxious, just for the simple fact that I was scared in case someone noticed I was awake. My mum was actually very lovely when she was well, but I was scared of my dad knowing that I was awake. And you know, so this constant anxiety just was there, and I got so used to it because it was part of my life 24/7 that I actually stopped noticing it. And there was a really significant moment. It was part of me. It was part of my experience. I was completely adrenalized all the time, and I just learned to live with it. And there was a really significant moment for me many years later when I discovered CBD oil for a different condition, actually, which I'll come and talk a little bit more about in a bit. But it was that moment where suddenly it was like I just felt this complete flatline. It was like a, and after a couple of weeks of taking it for some condition, suddenly I was like, I don't feel that constant feeling that I have, that I'd forgot, that I hadn't even realized was there for me. And that was the first point where I knew the difference of living with generalized anxiety and living without it. But to all intents and purposes, people who would see me would think, you know, I was really confident. My background's in training. I can stand in front of a room full of people. I've done talks internationally as well as in the UK, you know, really high level business events. And yet people would always say, oh, she's really confident and she's really at ease and she's really comfortable. And no one knew. I think I didn't even recognize in myself how anxious I constantly was. And there was this moment for me where I realized that there was a difference between that generalized anxiety. Hello, Adele. I realized that there was a difference between that generalized anxiety that we can feel every day and what happens when we feel anxiety because of a specific situation. It happened, I mentioned that I found myself doing training as a volunteer at university, but that actually happened completely by accident. I found myself in the wrong meeting with the wrong people at the wrong time. They were the voluntary organisation that was a bit like the Samaritans that I volunteered for, were looking for people to join the executive team and to take on roles to support the other volunteers. And I think I wanted to probably do something social and be in the social group, but I found myself in the wrong room, and I was in the room where they were doing training. And I was 19 years old and I was really embarrassed that I was in the wrong room. So I didn't tell anybody. So I just sat there. And 2 weeks later, I was facilitating a discussion on a flip chart to a room of 60 people about counselling skills. And I was shitting myself, to say the least. So my best friend then was in the audience, and she came up to me afterwards and was like, oh my God, you were amazing. I was like, are you joking? Can you see the elephant-sized amounts of poo that were piling up behind me? She was like, no, you're completely at ease. So and the thing was, I loved it, you know. So I learned that actually there was this other type of anxiety for me, which was linked with excitement, which was linked with being about to do something amazing. When all our fears come up that say, don't do it, keep yourself safe, keep yourself small, don't put your foot above the parapet, don't put your head above the parapet, don't put your foot out across the curb,
sabotage,
you know.
boy.
Exactly. And that was my first awareness of there being this difference, and how actually sometimes when we feel the fear and we do it anyway, the rewards are phenomenal. And I'm going to share another really awesome example of that in a bit. Cool. So that was my experience of anxiety. And then as I go through the different things that I've tried and that I've shared with clients, I'll feed in a little bit more of my story as I go.
Hi, Kelly, by the way.
Say that again, lovely.
I just said, hi, Kelly.
Hello,
Kelly's watching. Kelly Walker.
Hello, Kelly. So the first thing I'm going to share is my experience of counselling and psychotherapy and coaching. Because of my childhood, I had quite a lot of counselling and some really profound psychotherapy actually in my early 20s that was really life-changing for me. And I think anxiety, usually that generalised anxiety, often has a root somewhere in childhood. Not always, because we live very stressful lives. Hello, Faith. But there can be a root in childhood, and having a space where we can just talk about it and explore it, I think it's really helpful. I found it really helpful. It can be really healing just to be heard, and just to have somebody bear witness as we talk about the pain that we've walked through. And in that, releasing that, I think we release some of the anxiety that gets blocked and trapped within us. The one thing that I would say is that it becomes easy sometimes to go into that victim space and to keep retelling the same stories and to keep going over them again and again and again, and we traumatizing ourselves. And you'll know a lot about this, Sally, in terms of your work. But we sometimes get so embedded in our own stories that we don't actually move forward. So for me, there's a knowing where the balance is. When is the right time, and when is it healthy to be going through our story and to be releasing the anxieties and the anguish, the angst that we have walked through. And when is it time to go, okay, I've done enough of that now, and it's time to walk forward. And I really like coaching for that. Actually, I trained as an executive coach at the Academy of Executive Coaching, which amazed me because it was a complete, again, accident. I don't believe there are any accidents. I think we're constantly taken to what we need to experience. But it amazed me how holistic and profound and deeply spiritual an experience it was for everybody there, and no one expected it. Even though it was a very profoundly deep business-based course, and for me, you know, kind of it really showed me that thing about coaching. The whole principle of coaching is it's about how do we get ourselves from A to B as quickly as possible. Coaches were once upon a time the fastest mode of transportation from one destination to another, place to another. Which I love that. That's the basis of the word.
Is that where that word comes from then, De-nit-sa, the word coach?
Yeah.
To help us get from A to B quicker than without a coach. Well, I never even looked at the link like that. That is, of course.
Doesn't it make sense? Like when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, duh. So that kind of, that moving forward in the 1800s, it was the fastest mode of transportation, and now it's a way of taking ourselves forward with the support of somebody else. And that, for me, it's got that energy of forward movement always embedded in its core, and I like that. Sometimes I think there's this, you know, time to move into that kind of work rather than to be just going over the past. So that was my first bit of experience in terms of shifting some of the anxiety that I had. And then one of the therapies that I learned was EFT, or tapping, which I'm sure, you know, kind of most of us here now will know about. And I found it really helpful, and still to this day find it really helpful sometimes. But there are times when I find also that it doesn't work. And I think, you know, for me, sometimes there's a point at which the anxiety gets so great that even tapping, I think, sometimes doesn't quite hit it for me, and it might for other people. And I think it's amazing. It's an amazing tool. And one of the things I would say here with all of this is I don't think there's any one right way. I think it's what's the best approach right now. Because to have a toolkit, to have a range of things we can draw upon really helps us, because what we need changes all the time. But one of the things that I found really, thank you, Sally. One of the things, I'm talking really fast so I can get through everything.
Go for it.
Tell me to slow down.
No, it's fine.
But one of the things that I thought was incredible in work with clients with EFT was that there's a point that not everyone uses in EFT. And it's the thymus gland point. So it's right in the middle of the breastbone.
Touching it. Even before you said, I was touching it.
It's amazing, isn't it? That connection. And that point is not always taught. And I discovered it by accident. But this is the point which connects us with the thymus gland, which governs our immune system in the body. But what it does on an energy level is our timeline. So all the experiences we've had through time is said to go through this point. It's a point of connection. If we're healthy, we're connected to ourselves, we can more easily connect with others. So it makes sense in terms of the link with the immune system. But what happens here is that what I found working with clients with different fears and phobias was that if they couldn't find the root cause, because that's what we're always searching for when we're working with EFT, where was the root? Where did it first begin? And what we started to find was that when we couldn't identify it, it was because it was from another lifetime, and they still carried it through into this lifetime. So as soon as we started to work on those fears and anxieties by including this point, including working on this timeline, we were then shifting anxieties from another lifetime, and the fears and the phobias went. So that for me was a really important tip. So actually when I feel anxious and I'm tapping, that's automatically where I go. Usually people go to either under the stomach point, which is under the eye, or the kidney point, which is here, which kidneys are where we hold our fear. But actually I always find that this is a point for me that really kind of shifts things. So that was EFT. Then learned different healing modalities. You already mentioned our journey with theta. And I learned Usui Reiki 20 years ago, nearly, and 10 years ago learned angelic Reiki, which I've taught since, and theta healing. I came up on about 7, 8 years ago, and all of them I love. All of them have helped, but none of them have helped, if you like, permanently remove that generalized anxiety. It was like they all turn things down so that it doesn't, so you don't feel anxious, but the anxiety would eventually come back in a new way. But beautiful experiences. My favorite go-to, actually, I have to say, is angelic Reiki, because of the peace it brings. It's just such a peaceful, beautiful feeling. And when we're anxious, what we really need to feel is at peace.
Because our nervous systems are so overstimulated, aren't they? And it's, if we can just get them to slow down and calm down, then we can sort of manage the rest of it, unless there are those programs that are kind of on a loop, those subconscious programs. But as a sort of rescue remedy, something like angelic Reiki is absolutely beautiful. I know what you mean.
It gives that really kind of sense of peace. Thank you. Absolutely. But again, kind of carried on my journey and journeys with clients in terms of finding other ways. And I then looked at, I wanted to talk about meditation and breathing. Now, I think meditation is amazing, and breathing obviously is crucial because it's how we stay alive. But I also think when we're really anxious, meditation's really hard. It's hard to switch off from those feelings when you feel completely wired. So, you know, there was this thing about me saying, I think it's really useful, especially if we can practice it every day. But I think it helps to have a guided meditation when we feel anxious, because to have somebody else's voice taking us away from ourselves, I think really helps us. But to try to sit and be still and in peace when you've got stuff going on, I think is a real challenge sometimes. So, you know, there was this, I wanted to say to everyone, you know, if you're trying that, be kind to yourself. You know, sometimes it's hard, and that's okay. You know, there are other ways. And you know, I actually really like the very simple guided meditations from Headspace. I think they're really, really easy to just connect with. They're uncomplicated, they're simple, but they're beautiful guided meditations, you know, for traveling to the stars and with the angels and all sorts of amazing, wonderful, magical things. And, you know, find the one that works for you.
I actually did Headspace. I did the anxiety pack on Headspace, and my biggest takeaway from that was to stop resisting against anxiety, to stop pushing against it. So notice the feeling and allow the feeling to be there. Almost welcome the feeling. So sort of say to it, okay, you're welcome. What are you trying to tell me? Just come in. Let's work on this together, you know. Because I think when we resist feeling anxious, there's another layer of stuff, of muck, of crap, you know, compounding, another layer of worry. We worry about feeling anxious. So that meditation has actually helped me to accept, and I think acceptance is a real key part of dealing with anxiety and managing it and navigating it. Just to accept the feeling rather than pushing it away. That's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you, Sally. Absolutely. It's really, I think it's really important. And breathing as well. You know, we're taught to breathe deeply, but not everyone's taught to breathe allowing our stomachs to expand, because we're taught to hold our tummies in, which inherently in itself is a way of saying your body is wrong, and therefore anxiety can connect to that. So being willing to allow our stomachs to expand as we breathe. When you watch babies breathing, this is how we naturally breathe. Their bellies just go in and out and in and out, because they're taking literally the breath of life all the way through their whole body. And we when we're holding our stomachs in, stop that. So being willing to loosen those jeans and just kind of let our bellies go in and out as we breathe really makes a difference in terms of allowing that anxiety to shift.
I see that a lot, so actually, when I'm singing. Sorry.
Yes. Sorry, no.
Yeah, I see a lot of people really restricted in their breath and just chest breathing, and it's amazing how many people have a really bad habitual pattern of not allowing the abdominal muscles to relax on the in-breath. If you can make your belly go really big on the in-breath, then you allow your diaphragm to flatten, and you allow more air and more oxygen into your body. And oxygen is a cure-all, you know.
Yeah.
It really
Yes.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really is.
Yeah. Your next
Thank
point.
you. So, and the next thing I started to do was I developed my own little morning practice, a bit like the morning pages, where you just write out, you free form write whatever comes to mind. But I slightly adapted it. So what I would do was, there were 3 parts to it. It was half an hour every morning, and there were 3 parts. And the first part for 10 minutes was I would do that free writing, like the morning pages, but with a twist. So what I would do is I would start by writing the phrase. Rachel's just said, I've been breathing in for the last 30 years. No wonder my head flies off. Oh, yeah, well, exactly. I learned that. Same thing. Snap. I think it was 35 years for me. You know, I hear you totally, Rachel. And it does make, you know, a lot of this, that when I look at it, I'm just like, why didn't I know this before? Because it makes sense. A lot of this makes sense. So with the morning pages, what I do is there are 3 parts to the morning practice. The first is the morning pages, to writing things out, but the twist is that I always ask other people, and I do this myself. So I write that phrase. I start by writing that phrase that you say when you've had it and you're throwing your hands to the heavens. Now, for me, the phrase is "for fuck's sake." So I call it the "for fuck's sake" exercise. I have used this as a problem-solving exercise in corporate events, which is brilliant. Sales teams love it particularly.
Yeah.
But basically, I will start with the words "for fuck's sake," just to allow my greatest angst out. Now, not everyone's comfortable with that, and if you're not comfortable with it, but you like the sound of doing this process, then don't do it. But I found it allowed my angst and my anxiety and all the things I was worried about to flow out more quickly. I'd just get to it more quickly if I did that first. So then 10 minutes of writing it all out and asking source or God, not meant in a religious way, but in that kind of universal unconditional love way, or Mother Earth, to just take everything that you're expressing on paper from you and to transform it into love. So you're not left with that gunky energy after you finish the exercise. Just ask that it's transformed to love. Just 10 minutes writing it all out. And then once it's out, it's so much easier to sit in still meditation.
Yeah.
Because you've released loads of blocks. So then spending 10 minutes in still quiet meditation, and then 10 minutes writing down as many things that you can think of to be grateful for in your life.
That's lovely. That's a beautiful practice. I'm going to do that.
It's one of the most lovely, nourishing ways to start the day, and you know, to release some of that angst makes such a difference in terms of connecting with the positive afterwards and giving ourselves permission. You were talking, Sally, about, you know, a lot of this is about accepting ourselves and not resisting. And actually, if we don't resist it and we walk into it and we look at it and we see it and we own it and we don't judge it and we just accept that that's there, it just makes it so much easier to find the peace we're actually looking for. So those are my morning pages and the "for fuck's sake" exercise. That's all in the guide that I've written, so you can see all of that. The next thing I wanted to talk about was herbal medicine. And I worked for a time for Neal's Yard down in Brighton, which some of you I know will know. And I completely fell in love with herbal medicine. As some of you will have heard who were here at the beginning, my initial love was pharmacy. I was going to be a pharmacist. I spent years working in pharmacies. And I realised over time that actually something was happening in that people were experiencing side effects. I started to watch people experiencing side effects that made me feel very uncomfortable. And so I started to take an interest in natural medicines, and herbal medicine was my natural go-to. I was never going to be a homeopath, and I'll get to how that happened, but herbal medicine was my go-to. And I love my herbal teas. My friends laugh because I travel with my herbal teas everywhere.
Me too.
They're amazing, and they can be really supportive of our adrenal glands, and of our immune system and our whole nervous system. And I'm just going to mention 2 or 3 or 4 herbs that I particularly love. Skullcap is one of my absolute faves as a nervine, as a herb that supports the nervous system. It's really calming, it's really soothing, very relaxing. Sometimes it can enable us to doze off a little. It's that relaxing, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful herb. The other one's a lemon balm, which is a much gentler one. They used to call it mother's balm or mother's ease, because mothers would drink it. It grows really easily around people. Lots of people have lemon balm in their gardens, and it's just a herb that makes us go, ah. So that's a lovely one. Lime flowers are really relaxing as well. Licorice is brilliant for the adrenal glands, actually, and supporting the adrenal glands. And one of the things that Pucker did very well, unfortunately, I am now in a Pucker boycott. They were my favourite company for herbal teas, but because they've been bought by Unilever, I won't buy them anymore.
No, that's awful.
Yeah, it's really sad, because they are an amazing range, and they specifically took the wisdom of all the different herbs and added licorice to almost everything. It's a little bit of licorice, but it's because of wanting to support our adrenal glands because of the stressful lives we live in the modern day. So lots of wisdom, lots of brilliance that's kind of been hijacked in my world. So the other and go to Neal's Yard. That's the other thing. If ever you or another herbalist, depending on where you live, if you'd like them to make you up a tea blend, go. It's a wonderful thing that they do, you know. And sometimes just putting some chamomile in with some rose petals. Rose is amazing for just opening the heart to a transformation happening, to a healing happening, to a release of something. You know, supporting the heart while you're trying to release your anxiety is a great thing to do. So they will make up beautiful tea blends. So I would just say, go treat yourself. They're not expensive. And you can get something really lovely made up just for you.
It's a really nice way of just caring for yourself as well, and doing something really simple, because our nervous systems are so hijacked by dopamine, by cortisol, by adrenaline, by what we watch on the telly, by what we see everywhere. You know, we're constantly hypnotized by, we need to do more, we need to be more, we need to be more successful, we need to be prettier, we need to be more fitter and healthy. But actually by getting something like a herbal tea, for me, it's the simplicity. It's going back to nature. It's almost ritualistic, you know, and to have something that is going to slow you down rather than give you that kind of quick energy thing that you think you need, but actually you don't really ever need. Like, I think for anxious people anyway, we never need more caffeine. We never need more stimulants. Some people can tolerate coffee and stimulants, particularly if you've got a slower metabolism. But for those fast metabolizers, you just can't do it unless you're doing like lots of exercise, I suppose. But yeah, that's why I love the herbal tea sort of ritual, because it's more of a feminine approach to just having a little break, you know.
Absolutely, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that, aren't we, Sally?
Yeah.
But that's a really important point. We think when we think a way of coping is actually to up our ability to handle stress. And it's quite the opposite. When we're feeling anxious, it's because our body is saying, enough right now, you need to slow down. So I think that slowing down, like you were saying, it's a caring for yourself. It's a really looking after yourself. And also I think secretly it's a little bit of a rebellion, and saying, no, I'm not stepping up. I'm pushing myself beyond what I can cope with. I'm actually going to learn to listen to myself and what I need, and to love myself.
I love rebellion. That is cool, that. Be a rebel. Go. Everyone's going right. You go left.
Exactly.
Really good strategy, I think. So, sorry, your next one.
No, not at all. And there's one thing I've added. I've put a recipe into the actual guide I've written for. The other thing I think I find really helpful from a kind of herbal, spicy kind of world is turmeric. Turmeric. I have a turmeric latte every day, and I've put my recipe up there. It's very simple. What amazes me about turmeric is we know it's an anti-inflammatory. We know it has anti-cancer properties. That's all documented. But when we think about anxiety, what anxiety to me is it's literally, it's like your whole energy field and all your emotions are inflamed.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And
Of course.
it's doing that.
Mm.
And turmeric, and again, this completely landed with me by accident through experimentation, listening to what was happening in my body when I would drink it. But turmeric is really soothing. Whenever I have a latte, I feel like I've just got, oh. And I think it's because it's having an anti-inflammatory effect on my emotional being and my mental being and my energy field. So that's a De-nit-saism. I would say test it, try it, experiment. Beings, and again, there is scientific evidence of this. We aren't just physical beings. In fact, we're mainly energy, and we're 99% energy. In fact, when we look at how an atom is made up, an atom is only 1% physical and it's 99% energy. So if we're made of atoms, we are literally 1% physical and 99% energy. And some quantum physicists estimate that if we took all the space that exists in us as human beings and took that space away from everybody on the planet, all 7 billion of us, we'd all fit into the volume of a sugar cube. That's how little physical matter we actually have. So when
the density, a dense kind of block. I've heard that actually with like how we all began in that dense sugar cube, and then we all exploded, and that's how existence was created. That is what
I love that. I love that analogy. And for me, you know, that example with the turmeric completely fits with that. It's, if we're giving ourselves a medicine, that medicine isn't just going to treat us physically. It's going to have that same effect on our emotional body, our mental body, and our energy field. Hello, Marta. Lovely to see you here.
Oh, hey, Marta.
So that's herbal medicine. And now I'm going to come to CBD oil. So I mentioned it briefly earlier already. I had developed an autoimmune disorder that was affecting my eye, and I would have basically the equivalent of an arthritis attack, but in my eye, in my left eye, and it's agony. And I've had children, I've had a child, I've had broken ribs, but this a whole other level of agony and pain. And somebody suggested that I try CBD oil. Now, I was never a stoner. I can't say I'm completely drug-free in my life, or recreational drug-free in my life, but I was never a stoner. I couldn't cope with being completely cabbaged because I was too active to be cabbaged. And so I never really got into smoking cannabis. And I think street cannabis is it's not the same. It just isn't. Street cannabis and varieties like skunk, they actually will make mental health problems worse. They will make anxiety worse. They will make depression worse. They make people sick and unable to function in their ordinary lives and make them very unhappy. So what I'm talking about is not that. Hello, Teresa. I'm talking about CBD oil, which is basically the cannabinoids, the THC in the cannabis plant, which works with our own cannabinoidal system to bring complete relaxation. And it was amazing for my eye. But as I said earlier, it was the first moment in time at which hello, Teresa. It was the first moment in time at which, after a couple of weeks of taking it every day, I suddenly noticed I didn't have this feeling anymore. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to not feel anxious all the time. And it astounded me that I had got to being 41, I think I was at the time, or 40, to have never, ever, ever known what it was like to be completely free of anxiety. And that was a revelation. That was a huge revelation, because it was the moment at which I realised that this was what I was aiming to feel all the time. And I'm not taking it now, and I took it for a little while and then stopped. And it worked wonders for the time that I took it. And I think personally, I think it's a miracle medicine. What I would say though is that there are lots of companies selling CBD oil that's actually not very good quality, that's actually basically hemp oil like you would put in your cooking. And I found that out by trial and error. So I would say really make sure that you're going to a good source. And I've put in the guide that I've written. I got mine from Amalife, which is a Bristol-based company who are amazing. The quality of what they produce and sell is fantastic. So I'd really recommend them, and going for a whole spectrum, which contains basically all of the possible aspects of the THC, really support health. So CBD oil. I think is magic.
Is the bee's knees.
That's a biggie for me. I think that really, yeah, it was the first time I was actually like, wow, this it's gone. Everything else seemed to, and it made me realize everything else I tried kind of tapered it off a little bit, helped it go away for a little while, but this was like flatline. It's amazing.
They are trying to legalize it, aren't they? Or no, use it in hospitals. Is that right now? You're quite up on all the politics and stuff like that. What is going on with it at the moment?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So there was a legal case where finally it's been allowed. It was allowed to be given to a child.
That's right. With epilepsy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that legal case has kind of opened the floodgates. So now children can have it, and the government agreed that adults can have it too. I'm going to say something quite controversial. I don't know enough, but from conversations I've had, I'm a bit wary. I spoke to a good pharmacist friend of mine who told me that the early studies that pharmaceutical companies had made with cannabis as a plant, when they extracted the THC and were giving it to patients, they had to stop the experiments and the research because it was causing cancer in the patients they were giving it to. Now, I don't know what they were doing. I don't know what their extraction methods were. I don't know where they were getting their plants from, what variety they were, what strain. I don't know the detail. But my immediate feeling was, and please check if it resonates with you, is this is a herb that is supposed to grow under the sun, the energy of the amazing sun that warms our planet, with wonderful quality water, not in a sterilized environment, but with the love of a human being who cares for the plant they grow. And to give someone a sterilized version of a plant that literally is an expression of the love of nature and its ability to heal, I don't think it compares. I don't think the quality will compare. So if I'm honest, while it's going to be made available on prescription, which will make it much more accessible for people because it will be cheaper for people who can't pay the kinds of money that it costs to get CBD oil properly. At the same time as that, if it was me and I could afford it, and I was in a position where I was in hospital and had a choice of taking pharmaceutical grade CBD oil or really good quality CBD oil that I know a human being with love and a big heart and intention had grown it with the warmth of the sun and with the love of the earth, I would absolutely 100% choose that.
Yeah, of course. It's like, buying organic or buying stuff that's been sprayed with pesticides.
Yeah. And also for me, there's something corrupt about the money making aspect. But
big pharma.
And I don't want to buy into that, but that's a whole other conversation we may or may not get to. So CBD oil, I think, is remarkable. But the other thing, and this is the thing that's amazed me, because this came left field for me, was I'm now studying to be a homeopath. But I discovered homeopathy. Now, I thought homeopathy was a load of rubbish. I did science at school. I was going to be a pharmacist. I spent years working in pharmacy. I could understand herbal medicine because pharmaceutical drugs came from herbs on the whole. I could see the link, but this was a sugar pill. I was like
vibrational medicine, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't compute that for a long time. And, and actually, of course it's going to work, because when we go back to, I was talking about how we are 99% energy, 1% physical matter and 99% energy. To take a medicine that's purely focused on our energy field, well, of course that makes sense when we're mainly energy. So of course it's going to work. But I didn't believe that was possible. And the thing that changed it for me actually was my son had colic when he was born, and he spent the first 6 weeks of his life crying. And bless his little heart, it was really uncomfortable to see. And I had exhausted all my options. I tried everything with him. And in the end, I was like, oh God, all right then, let me try this, even though I just didn't think it was going to work. And I crushed him a little tablet between 2 spoons and I popped it into his mouth. And I swear on my life, he literally went from just screaming like a little beetle on his back, which is how he'd been for 6 weeks. And I put this little powder in his mouth, and he just stopped crying, and he completely unfurled his body before my eyes. And his legs came down, his scrunched up knees came down, and I just went, wow.
Mm.
And every time I gave him a homeopathic remedy as a small child, I would see him immediately shift in front of my eyes. And that's not the placebo effect. You know, you can't, you know, to give it to an adult and an adult go, oh yeah, I feel better. You can maybe argue the placebo effect, but which, by the way, is a whole other conversation, because it's an important thing, the placebo effect. It's about the
very
power
much.
of the mind.
Yeah, power of
But
belief.
yeah, exactly. But homeopathy for me was a real like wow. And then when I got diagnosed with this autoimmune condition, I was taking CBD oil, but I there was a moment at which I realised that I didn't know why, it was an intuitive sense, but I just knew the only medicine for me was going to be homeopathy. And it didn't make any sense. So I went to see a homeopath I'd seen a couple of times. And something amazing happened in my journey. So I eventually signed up to start studying, and I completed my first year. But I realised something phenomenal with it. What homeopathy does is it works on the principle. It was founded by a German medical doctor. Loads of medical doctors and pharmacists have been involved in its progress and development over the last 200 years. You know, medical practitioners who wanted to find a safer way of practicing medicine without the side effects. And I'm going to come to Marta's comment in a moment, because I can only see a part of it. And thank you for commenting. With homeopathy, what we're doing is we're seeking to strengthen the vital force. It's the inner life force that we carry. When our vital force, right, in our inner life force is strong, then our immune system is strong. Now, what I realised after about a year of being on a real homeopathy journey and peeling back layers with remedies for a year with my homeopath, I suddenly had this moment where I was like, I actually feel quite strong in myself. And it was the first time in my life I probably felt this strong. And what I realised was, from the moment I realised that, there was like a month, 6 weeks, where I was like, well, I'm not going to tolerate that thing that's happening in my life that makes me a little bit weaker. And I'm not going to tolerate being with those people there who have all these things to say about me that aren't nice. And I'm not going to go and do this activity over there with people who don't value what I bring. And I just went through my life with it was like going through it with a shovel and going, I will not tolerate in my life any situation that is not nourishing for me. And it was like, because I was strong on the inside, I didn't care about the effect it had. I obviously did everything I did kind of love. But with everything else I've ever tried and everything I've discussed up until this point, it's always about working with something externally, like an idea or an affirmation or a thought, or shifting something perhaps, but, you know, dealing with another almost like external perspective. And it was the first time I'd come across something where I was being strengthened from the inside, so that I was making the changes from the inside out, rather than making changes based on affirmations and hoping I'd stop feeling anxious and would feel okay about them on the inside.
I see what you mean.
And so for me, I would say that's probably that this and the next thing I'm going to talk about, strengths, those two things are the two most significant and lasting sources of help for anxiety that I have come across. And since having that moment of realizing I was strong, I flatlined again. I don't have that generalized anxiety. Of course, I feel anxious when there are situations that come up that are new, where I go, oh my God, I've never done this before, or I've got to do this, or, you know, but that's a temporary thing. But that generalized, constant, adrenalized, anxious state has gone. And it was a complete surprise, and I think that's probably why I love it the most. I love a good surprise. I love something to go, wow, I wasn't expecting that, and this was a wow, I was not expecting that. The thing about homeopathy is it's really worth seeing a proper practitioner, because you go on a journey. It's not a quick fix, it's a journey, and because it's a journey, it's about actually getting to the root and really going deep. And homeopathy was traditionally, you know, and still sometimes, you get what's called the one remedy miracle, or the one remedy result, which is basically you give somebody one remedy and literally it's like the whole of their life has changed. And that's how homeopathy used to be practiced. But we live such complicated lives with so many complicated layers and so many toxins we're dealing with, that it's actually more a process now than a one remedy miracle. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is there are kind of remedies you can get. So Helios, and I've put in the guide, Helios Homeopathic Pharmacy, which is an amazing homeopathic pharmacy, probably the best in the world, produce a stress relief combination of 3 remedies: aconite, arsenicum, and argent-nit. And it's just lovely. It's a lovely remedy, and you can just take one as and when you need it. And I've put the link into the guide because I just think that's like a really easy, simple go-to. Neal's Yard sell it. It's also known as the AAA because it's got 3 remedies beginning with A, but Helios is selling it as stress relief. So that might be something people might want to try if they're called.
Do you think with homeopathy that if you're tuned into the subtle energies already, do you think it works better than if you're sort of more used to conventional medicine, or, you know, like a belief thing? If you point blank refuse to believe that something like homeopathy can work, do you think it sort of blocks the effects of it for some people? Or have there been documented cases where that doesn't matter, where it works despite someone's disbelief in it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think both are true. So there are documented cases of people who thought it couldn't work. I know people who will tell stories about how they just thought it was the biggest load of rubbish, and then were like, but that changed. In themselves, you know, that absolutely happens. But at the same time as that, it is easier when someone's energy and emotions are open to it, because it's an energy medicine. And actually it's not just about the medicine, the remedy, and the person taking it. Actually, when you're working with a practitioner, you're the 3 of you, the practitioner, the client, and the remedy, you're all doing a dance together. And when it's the right remedy, that remedy will bring in the healing aspects that the practitioner is working with too. So it's working in very subtle levels. So I'd say both are true.
Okay.
Good question.
That's awesome.
I'm just going to come to what.
Can you read
that again?
Can you read that?
Yeah, it says, as we know, we're all born with cancerous cells, which in most cases are activated by our lifestyles like stress and modified food. Herbs cannot do it. But whatever helps big numbers of people get better, multi-billionaire concerns will destroy, especially by feeding the population with fake side effect information, which is just your opinion. I completely agree, actually, Marta, and I don't know how we're doing for time because I've left my clock over in the other room. But if we've got time, I'm going to quickly talk about that, actually, because I think that's really important. Yeah,
do you want to talk about it now?
If it's okay, I'm just going to finish this as quickly as I can, and then
that's
come
fine.
back.
Yeah,
it's really so because the next thing on my list was strengths. This was the other most significant thing that shifted my generalized anxiety as well as homeopathy. So I accidentally ended up working for a company that produces and uses a psychometric tool that measures our strengths. So I was working as a positive psychologist with other positive psychologists. And in the field of positive psychology, when we're talking about strengths, we're talking about what gives us energy when we're doing it, what makes us feel good. And our strengths are linked to who we are. So what makes me feel good will be different to what makes you feel good, Sally, and everybody else, based on our different personalities. So they're fixed. The strengths I have won't really change, and the strengths you have won't really change. Now, when I first completed, I use a tool called Strength Scope, and which was developed by the company that I worked for, and I love it. I know I'm biased because I worked for them, but it's the only one that's recognised by the British Psychological Society, and there's something about it that's very accessible, and it's the only one that I'm aware of where you can see how the strengths work together and how they sabotage each other, and none of the other profiles really do that, and I think there's something very special about that. But what I realised was that there were certain aspects of myself I was always telling myself I was crap and rubbish at.
Okay.
And it was practical life things, like just being completely crap and rubbish, booking train tickets and flight tickets, and, you know, just like generalised life stuff, paying bills and stuff. You know, you can give me a maths theory and I'll sit there and read it and be delighted, but give me bills, really, I don't understand how this all works. You know, it'd be real, like, really. And then when I saw my profile, I saw that common sense and efficiency are not strengths of mine.
So that made sense to you.
Right. And I'm hugely energized by all sorts of other things like strategic thinking and creativity and leading and self-development. And, you know, you probably picked up all of this
Yeah,
already.
I have.
But yeah, enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But to see on paper and to go, oh, but I'm not energized by a common sense. Oh, that's okay, because that's who I am. It was literally like this whole layer of anxiety about how crap I must be just vanished.
Yeah. Because it's
I was
not your
able to
fault.
accept exactly.
A bit like
It's
when you
just who I
understand
am.
your astrology charts, you look at your
Yeah.
astrology and you're like, oh my God, of course I'm not like that. Or I've got Virgo rising. That's why I'm a perfectionist and that's okay, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. And it's
Yeah.
that when we have that self-awareness that makes us, oh, we can stop telling ourselves we're crap and that we're useless and that, you know, we're not worthy and all the other stuff that we will tell ourselves that make that anxiety worse. So that was the other thing. It was the first point at which I could really accept myself. And it's an invitation, because when you know those things, you can say, right, well, I know that's not a strength for me and it's draining for me to do it. So how can I connect with someone for whom it is a strength?
Yeah.
They can, so I can focus on the stuff that I love the most.
That's right.
So actually,
Gay
it helps build relationships.
Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. And Gay Hendricks, the author, says we should all aim to be living in our zone of genius. And if
Yeah.
your zone of incompetence is cleaning the house, doing the bookkeeping, give that job to somebody else, pay them to do it so that you can then focus in your zone of genius, which is where you thrive, which is where you feel alive. And you're not wasting time, precious time and resources on things that you're no good at and which is not your fault. You know, pass it on to somebody that is good at it. And like you say, it's great for human relationships, which is also really good for anxiety as well. So
Exactly, and feeling supported. It's like
yes.
there's no need for shame then,
Yeah,
because we feel supported. We are. We don't need to be ashamed about it because other people have their areas of non-strength. We've all got them, and we can then move forward together with feeling supported. You know,
yeah,
it's a win-win for everybody.
absolutely.
Beautifully said. The other things, I'm only going to talk about a few things that remain on my list, and the rest is in the guide because I'm just
Yeah,
mindful of time.
sure.
The first is nature. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. As we were saying earlier, if we're talking about the body being inflamed, then and our energy field being inflamed, and me thinking that's what anxiety is as a De-nit-sa-ism, be in nature, go hug a tree. I actually have a tree in Greenwich Park where I'm near to, and it's my little place of heaven. I go sit in this tree and I tell the tree what's going on for me, and I cry sometimes, and you know, and when I ask for help, when I sit in this tree, I always have it that day or the day after. It's a remarkable thing. Trees communicate with each other, as was shown beautifully in Avatar. We are now, scientists are now backing that up. They do. Trees communicate, and there's no reason that just because we don't speak the language of trees that they're not listening to us and communicating. You know, with this vast,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So go be in nature. It's incredibly soothing. It's you know, and it's the one. Well, we'll come on to the politics, but you know, it's one of the things that's made very difficult for us to do, and yet it's so necessary for our health. Other things are diet. You know, of course, healthy diet. Go organic if you can. I really feel that if we are taking in pesticides and herbicides like weed killers, you know, our body on a subconscious level will know that's bad for us. It will put us into a state of anxiety just for that, in addition to all the health problems that those things cause. So if you can go organic, or go as organic as much as you can, grow your own if it helps you. Make sure you get enough magnesium. Magnesium supports over 500 processes within the body. A lot of them are to do with our mental health. And you can have Epsom salt baths, which help us to get magnesium in. Viridian, a really lovely ethical supplement company, they do a nice high potency magnesium that's not too expensive. B complex, really important for vegans and vegetarians. Getting in some spirulina for vitamin B12 helps. Avoiding, of course, GMOs as well, because they cause cancer. The research is clear that GMOs cause cancer. Avoid additives, avoid processed foods, avoid anything that's, dare I say, coming from the US and has corn in it. But the other thing is take really good quality probiotics, because our gut health impacts on our mental health. 95% of the serotonin we produce is produced in the gut, not in the brain. We now acknowledge that there are two brains. There's the brain and the gut brain. And actually so much of our health, our immunity, 70% of our immunity, but so much of our mental health is dependent on a healthy gut. And we have built a world that has destroyed our gut biome in terms of antibiotics, swimming in chlorinated swimming pools, vaccines, the contraceptive pill. We live in a world that's, we buy ready packed fruit and veg from supermarkets. All that's been washed in bleach, very diluted bleach, but it's still bleach nevertheless that we are injecting, that's destroying our gut. So it's really important to get really good quality probiotics and to take them regularly. We all need them. For people with very serious autoimmune disorders, that may be looking at fecal transplants is the way. But it's something that all of us, I think, need to be mindful of, because our health literally is dependent on our gut. So that's that one. And then I taught, and I wrote in the guide, I talked quite lots about having the courage to defy that naysaying voice that tells you you don't matter, you're not worthy, you're silly, you're stupid, you're not good enough, you haven't made it, you're not a success, your body's not beautiful enough, your makeup's not great, your hair isn't right, all of that noise and that stuff, that's inflammation. And actually what happens when we say, do you know what, I'm not going to listen to that anymore, I'm going to do my own thing anyway. And I talk about in the guide one of the most profound experiences for me about experiencing probably one of the most extreme moments of anxiety, yet it was the most joyous moment of my life, where I'd separated from my ex-husband and was going through a really super painful divorce. And the only thing that saved me, as I was lying on a beach in Thailand having a complete breakdown on my own one Christmas, was reading Yes Man by Danny Wallace.
Okay.
Now it's been turned into a Hollywood film, and the Hollywood films are quite different from the book, and it's it's a good enough film, but the book is absolutely incredible. And Danny Wallace tells his story as a journalist who did this experiment of saying yes to everything for 6 months, and it's properly laugh out loud funny. I mean, it's the kind of thing, if you read on the tube, you will burst out laughing in front of everybody. They will look at you. And hello Rachel, welcome back. And the thing that I then came away with was, right, I was going to say yes to everything. So I spent 6 months saying yes to everything. And at the end of that 6 months, I found myself at a festival, and I was sitting in my tent reading the programme, and there was a little advert in it, and it said, why don't you come by Uke and spend the Saturday night playing with 100 other people live on the main stage at the festival? And I just laughed, because I don't play any musical instruments, turned the page, and this little voice in my head said, you said you'd say yes to everything. And my response to that, immediately my response to that was, oh fuck. So I did go and went and bought myself a ukulele and spent 36 hours being utterly terrified whilst trying to learn Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire and Kung Fu Fighting and Jolene by Dolly Parton. And we went on the main stage of festival to 20,000 people. We went on after Soul to Soul, and we were standing backstage when Soul to Soul finished with their last song, which was Back to Life, and we were on before the Beastie Boys.
Wow.
And still to this day, when you're a mum, people say to you, what was the best moment of your life? And it is expected that the answer you will say, and 99.9% of mothers will say, and maybe fathers, when my child was born. And actually, as much as I absolutely adore my dude, that was not the best moment of my life. The best moment of my life was standing on this stage, unable to play, because I was so completely, it was the most anxious I'd ever been in my entire life. I mean, I was properly panicked. And I'd forgotten my chords to begin with, so I was having to mime until I got myself together. But to have 20,000 people beaming in your direction and cheering at you and sending you lovely, happy vibes is one of the most incredible things I think I'm ever going to have experienced in my life.
Did it change you forever, would you say? It's sort of one
Completely,
of those massive,
completely. Yeah.
pivotal events.
Yes. It was
Mm.
it was a supernova moment for me.
Yeah.
And it was a moment where I could completely accept my own anxiety. You know, I was like, but that of course I was terrified of doing it. And as you mentioned Gay Hendricks, you know, in his book The Big Leap, which is amazing. It's all about that. Before we're about to do something amazing, we will experience anxiety. We will experience those voices saying, don't do it. I must have told myself 1,000 times I wasn't going to do it, and what a ridiculous idea it was for me to even try. And yet, if I'd have listened to those voices, I would have missed, and listened to my anxiety, I would have missed the chance to have a life-changing moment, and one that carries me still to this day. And that was 10 years ago. So, you know, there's a real thing here about being in our courage as well, dealing with that generalized anxiety, because that's not healthy to have that all the time, but to accept that there will be times as well when our anxiety goes up as we're getting ready to do something amazing. And then to find our way of managing that so we can go through it, because that anxiety in those situations is a way of saying to us, actually something amazing is about to happen. If you're willing to be brave enough to talk through it, something amazing is going to happen for you. So understanding anxiety and its different ways of presenting itself, I think, is really key. And the final thing I was going to say was Marianne Williamson, who I love, in her book The Law of Divine Compensation, she talks about how we often, when we're worried about how we're going to earn a living, we'll come back to, oh, you know, well, what shall I do, and what would I like to do, and, you know, we make it about us. What job am I going to get? And she says, when we let go of the ego mind, when we say, actually, when we give it up to God, non-religious God, unconditional love, source, whatever we want to call that energy, to that higher power, when we give it all over and say, actually, how can I best serve? Then every decision we make comes from a place of it not being about us anymore. And I find that helps, that's helped me massively with my anxiety, because I've been like, but it's not about me. So there's moments when, you know, I've been presenting where I would have otherwise felt nervous, where I've just gone, you know, and with, you know, I've spent most of my life presenting and training and teaching, but there are still moments where I, you know, have think and get really anxious about it, and it's coming back to that and saying, but this isn't about me, this is about God wanting me to do some work here. And my job is just to show up and let God work through me.
Just to sort of facilitate it, you know, and be that channel, be that vessel that the energy can come through. And it does, it takes all the pressure off you to be excellent, to be perfect. If you just think of yourself as doing a service to humanity, I think it just sort of lightens the load a bit.
It does, I think. So that was my very long list of my journey with anxiety.
That is like, talk about value for money there, people. Come on, she's given you all of that for free. Hello.
Bless you. I don't know how we're doing for time.
Oh, we're
I've got so much else.
But don't worry. I do want to ask you about, because we had those three things. I wanted to talk about the cultural reasons behind why you think anxiety is really, really high at the moment. I also wanted to talk about why we shouldn't give a fuck about what people think about us, and why medicine is a feminist issue. Maybe we should get you on another time to do all of those things. What do you think? Do you think it would be too much?
I would be really happy to do that. I have written, actually, I've written about all of them in the guides that I wrote.
Right.
But do I have, I can't see the time, so I don't know if I've got literally...
Talk for another 10-15 minutes, it's fine. Let's do it.
I will sorry, but I will, there's one thing I think that's really important, and I think if nothing else, because everyone can read everything else if they want to, but for me there is something really important about anxiety on a political and social and global level. And I think that we deliberately live in a world that creates anxiety that we don't need to feel, because it serves governments and corporations for us to be anxious. Because when we're anxious about what we look like, about whether we've got enough to eat, about whether whether we can pay for our homes, about whether our relationship will survive the ridiculously long hours that we work, about whether we will be able to keep our jobs and feed our families, about whether our bodies are enough, about whether we've got the most high-tech gadgets, whether we've got the best home or the biggest car. When we feel anxious about who we are, we do not have the strength, the energy, or the motivation to drive change.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that's given me goosebumps everywhere.
So for me, that actually is, we were talking about being a rebel. The most rebellious act that we can take is to do every single thing we can to tackle our anxiety, our generalized anxiety, not that kind of anxiety because we were about to do something amazing. But that low level fear and anxiety that is inbuilt in us because of the way our world is created. The biggest rebellion we can make is to tackle that anxiety, to do something about it, to free ourselves from it, and in the process find the energy to then make the world a better place and to drive through change. Because the world as it's structured is unacceptable. It is unacceptable for people to not be paid properly for their work, to have to turn to government to top up the money that they earn because the corporations would rather give it to their shareholders than to their workers. It's unacceptable for people to live in substandard housing and for most of their income to go on paying for it. It's unacceptable for people to be worried about how they're going to feed their families. It's unacceptable for people to work 12, 14, 16-hour days. And relationships are destroyed because of the lack of time people have for each other. It's misery upon misery upon misery. However, I say that because there is hope. We look at the Scandinavian countries, we look at Finland and Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and they are modelling how we can bring about change. And I think we are seeing opportunities politically. I do think we've got a very big hill to climb and a big dip to go through. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel for us politically, I think, that's about looking at social change, that's about looking at doing things differently, that's about fairer working, that's about looking after each other, that means that people are better supported across all levels of society, that homeless people get looked after properly, that, you know, all of this is out there. The possibilities are there. Solutions already exist that we've seen in other parts of the world. But we need to tackle our anxieties about stepping up and being the greatest that we can be and not giving a fuck what anybody else thinks, as people willing to do things differently and to drive through change once we see that we are capable, strong enough, able enough, powerful enough to do that.
I really feel strongly.
So for me,
issue.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for me, anxiety is a political issue.
Yeah. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, because we are so overstimulated by what is expected of us, how we're expected to live, and it's the dopamine trap, isn't it? It's it's feeding us with that dopamine all of the time, thinking that that's what we need, but actually what we need to do is take our power back and break that cycle. And I'm going through a massive transition at the moment, coming off dopamine and creating a life that is more nurturing, more sustainable, having been through horrendous burnout because of society's expectations and my own personal expectations. But really, I think that is, you know, parental and societal as well. So it's about choice. It's about choosing, you know, how long you want to work. And it's about choosing a different way of life, like you say, where you're going to buy your products from, what you're going to watch on the TV, who you're going to hang out with, what conversations you're going to have, who you're going to follow on Facebook and Instagram, and you know, what kind of exercise you're going to do, what reading you're going to do, and just doing everything you can that supports you, rather than feeding your addictions. I feel so strongly about it.
And it's one of those things, I think I think when we feel really anxious about who we are, we don't feel we have a choice to feel anything else. And we don't feel like we've got choices in our lives to live it differently.
Yeah, we feel very trapped. Anxiety makes us feel trapped and helpless.
Yes.
And that's the trap as well. The whole thing is a trap. So by taking responsibility and choosing to detrap yourself to come out of that trap, it's so hard. I mean, the amount of courage it actually takes to step out of that, if you're not used to doing that, can be terrifying in itself, unless you've got a support network. If you've got support, if you've got people who can hold your hand, who are going through the same thing that you are, then it becomes much easier, I think.
Absolutely. And we also have something in us called, it's a psychological issue, actually. We are trapped by something called the spiral of silence. From an evolutionary perspective, we have limiting thoughts that try to keep us safe, because back in cave people days, you know, if we were rejected by the tribe, we didn't survive in the wilderness. We needed each other to survive. And we're still carrying that anxiety of not wanting to be rejected by others, of wanting to make sure that we don't appear different to anybody else, so that we stay part of the tribe. And so that stops us from speaking out when we see something wrong happening, or that we feel is, you know, shouldn't be happening. Or that, you know, kind of when we see an injustice in the world, people will stay silent because of that fear of being rejected or socially isolated by others. And the amazing thing about living in today's modern age is that actually, if we're aware that we have that limitation, if we were aware that we are at times hindered by that spiral of silence, but we're aware that also there are other people like us always. We might think that the thing we're worried about ourselves or feel ashamed about ourselves, you know, is we might think we're the only people in the world who feel like that. It's not true. And our world of social media enables us to connect with, and the internet enables us to connect with other people who are just like us. And so actually, I think we're in a time when we really can feel like we are supported, no matter who we are, no matter where our interests lie, as long as they're obviously loving and, you know, healthy and balanced and all of the rest of it. So, you know, for me, there's that as well. You know, if we understand that we're programmed to limit ourselves, we also then have a choice about saying, actually, but I don't need to be controlled by that old cave person program.
And I guess that's where not giving a fuck comes in to play.
Yeah.
By having that attitude, you can break that cycle.
Absolutely.
You've been brave with that, haven't you? You really don't give a fuck sometimes, where some of your face, like if you don't follow De-nit-sa, you really need to follow her, because some of her statuses and her updates are really controversial and really, like, you know, upsetting the apple cart, and she has some great debates on there, so definitely worth following if you want some inspiration on how to be a fuck it person.
Bless you, thank you. I blame the homeopathy, but also there is a thing about bad things happen because good people don't speak. So I've made a conscious choice to speak about the things, even though they may be controversial. I have made a conscious decision that I will speak about those things. I know what it's like. I've been trolled for something in the past. I know what that feels like, but I will not be silenced, because bad things happen when good people don't speak. And I want to show people that it's okay to have a conversation. We don't have to be horrible to each other. We don't have to troll each other. We don't have to be, you know, fundamentalists with our views, you know, in a way that causes harm. You know, we can have a conversation and be respectful of people with different views. But I need to, you know, if I want other people to do it, I need to model it myself. So I made that decision to just not give a fuck and just be like, no, this is how I feel. Here's a conversation to be had. If people want to join in.
And do you ever feel shamed, or do you ever feel anxious about being out there on the leading edge? saying these things.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
right. So talking about the big leap.
Mm.
So I wrote a really, it was only a few weeks ago actually. I wrote a really, it was probably the most open I've been blog post, which was all about my dating profile and how I was changing my dating profile to, you know, basically be written from the perspective of a woman who has balls and gives a fuck, based on an article that was called Women Who Have Balls and Give, you know, who give a fuck. And it was such a moment of vulnerability for me. I was like, I can't put this out there. 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 But I knew I'd written something really special. And that isn't the only time. That's pretty much every time I put something out, actually. It's I have that big leap moment of upper limiting, of going, I can't put this out. It's going to be stupid. I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm going, you know, and all of that stuff comes up.
Yeah.
But the feedback I get and the responses I get, and friends will sometimes say to me, you know, maybe you're a bit too open there. Maybe you need to think about this. Maybe you need to change that. I value all of that feedback. You know, people who love you, you know, they when they give you feedback like that, it's not from a place of wanting to put you down. It's from a place of wanting you to be your best.
Yeah.
You know, we need each other, you know, to be those barometers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the feedback I get is amazing, of people saying, you know, I get regularly messages from people saying, reading what you wrote made me cry.
You do say a lot of what we are all thinking, I think, but even if we don't realize we're thinking it, you say it anyway, and then we realize that we've been thinking that all along. You know, so
thank you.
Anyway, I think we need to probably wrap things up, De-nit-sa.
Sorry.
We'll definitely, no, it's okay. We'll definitely get you on again to talk about, you know, medicine and feminism and whatever else comes up, I think, because you have such a wealth of information and you're so passionate about what you do. You just have a lot of knowledge, and I think it's really great that we have this tool. We can put this out into the world, and I can share this on YouTube, and hopefully more people will watch it. I know it's a long one, but it's definitely been worth it. I know for me, and I know people have been bobbing in and out of the conversation. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom and this PDF. Is it a PDF that you've put together for us?
It's on my website, actually. I'll send you the link. I put it on my website so that it's
great.
available, and I've put a little link to you too. So
yeah,
so
awesome.
I'll
that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so
thank you so much for having me. It's, you know, for everyone who's listened in and anyone who may listen in the future, thank you.
So just mention the name of your book and how people can work with you if they choose to.
Thank you, Sally. So my book is called Nature's Medicine Code. It's actually my second book. My first one was a guide for spiritual teachers called the Spiritual Teacher's Handbook, but this is the one that I'm focusing on at the moment. And it's called Nature's Medicine Code: Why Food and Medicine Can Make You Sick and What You Can Do About It. And basically, it's been 7 years in the making. It's a very practical guide to living a healthy life and has tips that I haven't seen anywhere else. But it's basically a really, I hope, fascinating, everyone tells me it's fascinating, theory on how we can really simply identify a code for everything we put into our bodies or on our skin that shows up in nature. It's a mathematical code, it's a geometric code, it's a musical vibrational code, and how it basically influences our health. And with products and foods that have that code, our body takes stuff in, and, you know, it uses those things as being health giving. And, you know, when we put things in our body that don't contain that code, our body treats it as a foreign object and it triggers an immune response. And that's what the book's about. And it's very accessible. It's all about, it's you know, it's maths and science, but it's the most fun and interesting maths and science, I promise. I've had so many messages from people going, oh, I never thought I'd find this interesting, and it's amazing. So, you know, I wanted to make it accessible to everybody. And in terms of working with me, I do a range of different things. I'm a healer, I'm a coach. I also do, you know, kind of strength sessions, actually, you know, so people can do what I did in terms of identifying their strengths and talking through, you know, how they use their strengths, how they show up, but also talking about what it is that makes them anxious through it. And there is an offer on that at the moment if people were interested. And that's that's on my website. And I also do speak and I present and I bake sometimes too. But
you're amazing cakes. You are definitely a multi-passionate person, aren't you?
Yeah.
So your website is de-nit-sa-appoline.com, is that right?
It's de-nit-sa-appoline.co.uk.
And De-nit-sa is spelt like Danica, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. So it's Danica, and then my surname is Appoline, APOLLINE.co.uk.
Well, we'll share a link for everybody. And I think that's it. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, lovely.
You're buzzing now, aren't you?
I am.
I can tell. It's going to be a long time before you get to sleep tonight. Yeah, me too. I've got to digest all of that information. So thank you so much. Like, really feel honoured that you've taken the time to prep and to share. There's so much wisdom in that. And if anyone's got any questions for De-nit-sa, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to answer them.
Absolutely. Just get in touch with Facebook or in any other way. But thank you, Sally. I feel so honoured that you asked. Thank you.
Oh, wicked.
Such wonderful work yourself.
Cool. All right, my lovely. Well, have a great evening and we'll speak soon.
You too, darling. Take care.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye everyone.